In this video, I'm going to be going over my history with food and with eating disorders as well. So this is a trigger warning for eating disorders and mental health and abuse as well. So I'm very excited to be talking about this. I've wanted to talk about this for quite a while now, and on my TikTok, I have talked about food in general and made several videos throughout, specifically in the last year and a half, my healing process that I've gone through. So I'm going to be going through things fairly chronologically, um, and I've healed my relationship with food along with all other mental and physical issues that I've dealt with, most of them lifelong, and they've all been solidly healed since the start of this year, 2026, and it's just unbelievable to me. These are things I thought I would always have to manage, but they're healed, and I know how to interact with my body and my mind in a way that is kind and supportive to the point where I don't really I guess I don't really consider myself having these issues, but it's more so that I know how to interact with how they present in me, so it's not distressing to me. So, first of all, I'm autistic and I do have ARFID, which is an eating disorder common in autism that you can look up. For me, it's mainly presented itself as, disorders present themselves differently in everyone, as just a lot of sensory issues with food, as well as just a really limited variety of food that I like to eat. I like to eat very consistently, like the same thing. Um, so that's just kind of always been there, and so I just, like, I guess identified as, like, a picky eater that was it's kind of, like, annoying for people, but I didn't really think about it much until later on in my life, specifically when I was 25 and I discovered that I was autistic, did I really start thinking about having ARFID and how that showed up for me personally. So I'll be talking about that later. Um, there's just a lot of heavy topics as well. So I feel a lot of mixed emotions, very happy that I'm healed, happy to be talking about it, and also really sad and grieving for what I've gone through. So there's kind of two other issues that I've dealt with, again, chronologically. The first one being binge eating. So, and I guess this ties into like body image a bit as well. I think I've already made a video kind of more talking about that, but like when I was like 11-ish, I started becoming aware of my body and that it was praised to be thin in society. I've always been praised for being thin, well, most of my life. And so to me, I'm like, oh, I need to keep this up. So I need to always be holding my body in a certain way. And if people aren't commenting on me being thin, then I'm like losing value, is how like internally this process was going. So that contributed a bit to my distress. So when I was like 14 or 15, I started binge eating. So for me, there's like a particular type of food that I was binge eating. For me, I never purged. And I also didn't really identify with having anorexia because I wasn't trying not to eat. But for me, just genetically, I have an incredibly fast metabolism to the point that like drugs that you take when you have like surgery for pain, they don't have effect on me, because they go through my system too fast to like dull the pain. So it's actually very inconvenient. And just genetically, it can be hard for me to get enough calories to support my body in a healthy way. So for me, when I was binge eating, even though I wasn't purging and I didn't have anorexia, because I was binge eating a certain type of food, I no longer was hungry for any other type of food because I was just filling up so much on this particular food. that I wasn't getting enough, I don't know, like, the particular wording, like, nutritionally, but I wasn't getting enough, like, substance to put on enough, I don't know, energy for my body, fat and muscle and whatever. So when I was binge eating, I actually was losing weight. Because I wasn't, maybe, like, I wasn't, like, well-rounded in what I was eating, I suppose. I don't exactly know what was happening, like, nutritionally and biologically, but for me, when I binge ate, I was losing weight, and I was already very thin, and I felt, for me, the most distressing part was feeling like I couldn't stop. I wasn't having fun interacting with food. And for me, how ARFID was interacting with me was that, and just being autistic in general, it was hard to interact with food. It felt terrible just to maintain my life. And also, I've just always was suicidal. I was born suicidal, got worse at the age of 4, and it was just really bad. And so I didn't want to be living. So to have to be forced to eat, and eating already just so many sensory issues and really, really poor interoception to the point where I didn't know when I was hungry. And on top of that, so like I also just had such severe depression always that, like, for me, when I was binge eating, it was like kind of to fill this like emotional void. And then I was feeling so guilty, and then I was worried I was going to gain weight, even though the opposite was happening. I was worried I was going to gain weight, and I was worried I wouldn't hold the same like value for my appearance that I felt like I had. That, again, since I didn't want to be living, it felt like a few things, like people pleasing for others, trying to help other people, getting good grades, and looking a certain societal way was my worth. So when I was binge eating and terrified of gaining weight, it filled me with so much shame and guilt, and it was just really awful. And I felt like I couldn't stop. I just physically felt like I couldn't stop binge eating. Um, So yeah, just a lot of shame and guilt, and it was awful. So that started when I was 15, and 14 or 15, and I really didn't stop until a few years ago. I'm 29 now. I mean, honestly, I didn't stop until like about a year and a half ago, fully. Um, Instead, I kind of just more, I guess, accepted what was going on. And instead of feeling all this shame and guilt, like, I gave myself parameters. Like, instead of like eating this particular food to the extent I like said I can only eat X amount of this food. Also, for me, I tried to keep having the food not in the house, and that just made things for me like way worse. So instead, I try to have like a ample supply of it, so I never felt fear of running out. And then just at a particular time of day, I would eat a particular quantity of this food. And that's how I kind of like maintained it, because I don't really view any food as like inherently unhealthy for you necessarily. There's different things that interact with different people's bodies uniquely. Um, but I wouldn't say like this food itself was unhealthy for me. It just was more like mentally really distressing. So I'll take a pause on that and then kind of come back to it at the end. The next part with food really was the worst and most traumatic for me, which just kind of makes me laugh to like de-stress and move the energy through my body, because it was just so much. For me, I think like going through things alone that are just like in my own mind, it's a bit easier, but when it has to deal with someone else and their treatment towards me, it's a bit harder for me. So this next thing with food came from someone I used to date, so an ex of mine. And I felt very unsafe with food around this person. For me, I'm vegan now, and just my whole life I haven't really liked many types of meat, but I would have some types of meat occasionally. Some meat I have never had and never will have. And one thing that really started this unhealthy relationship with food with this ex of mine was that they gave me a food with that I didn't know contained a certain meat that I never wanted to have, and they told me afterwards. To me, they seemed to find amusement in my distress, and it was just really, really unconsensual and fucked up. And that just really broke my trust and made food really scary to me. So a lot was happening, but basically I ended up like really depending on this person, it felt like, to help like nurse me back to health in various aspects of my life. And I was also people pleasing, so I was trying to expand my palate by basically forcing myself to have food I didn't want to have to please this person. I felt really uncomfortable. I was really terrible at setting boundaries because it felt like I just really tied my identity to who I was dating. They felt more like me than I ever felt like me, especially with having DID, being suicidal, and just not having a plan for life. It felt like I was living for the people I was dating. So that was bad for a while. Just like forcing myself to have food I didn't really want to have. But the worst of it for me was at the end of this relationship that I had. I started having boundaries because I realized that I only want to be with people if they want to be with who I am authentically, and I was not being my authentic self. I didn't even really know who my authentic self was because I had never tried to be that person ever. But I felt like I couldn't keep going how I was, so I needed to start at least saying what my preferences was. I didn't really understand boundaries, which is like, if you do this, then I will do this, right? Instead, I was more just saying, I'm upset with this, and I'm going to tell you I'm upset with it. So that started happening, and I started talking about, trying to in a very loving and caring way, like, hey, I'm glad you're really passionate about these foods. They bring you happiness and joy. I'm sorry that I wasn't honest with myself or you, that I don't really enjoy eating these foods, Like, this person did genuinely expand my palate in certain ways that I enjoyed, but in other ways I didn't enjoy, and I was more just eating for them to make them happy, and that made me feel unsafe with my relationship with food. But when I was expressing this, in my mind, they seemed upset by this, some type of shame or something was going on. I paused there because this is just a really tough topic for me. And something happened that's just never happened before or after in my life. And I haven't really talked to anyone about it professionally. So the best way I have to describe it is like when I was insecure and feeling stressed about having food, and I expressed, I don't want to eat this food. And they were saying to me, I want you to eat this food. I became not only about that food, but just any food basically, so riddled with anxiety that I started saying, is it good? And like I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. It was involuntary. Like the closest thing I can think about is like tics, like with Tourette's. And I also had like a head movement kind of like that. And it was involuntary and I couldn't, like I could suppress it, to an extent when I was out of the house and around other people, but when I was in my home, it was like too much energy, and I just would say, and I'm not even gonna like do it how I did, but I would say in a particular very stressed out way, is it good? Over and over, and I couldn't stop, and it was just really awful. And that never happened to me before. And they, in my mind, seem to react really poorly to this and take this very personally. And I couldn't stop, and I just didn't want to be pressured to eat food. I didn't want to eat with already having so many issues with food and eating and living and maintaining my body. So that's kind of the extent of that. I'm not dating this person anymore. That never really did stop once it started in our relationship. And it did eventually fade out. I'm not quite sure how long that took. But I don't do that anymore. I don't have, the best I can describe it as tics. I don't have those tics anymore with the head movements or saying, is it good? But it was a lot. So now kind of moving on to more like back with ARFID, right? So I had an autistic burnout when I was 24, and 6 months later, by the time I was 25, I realized I was autistic. I realized I had ARFID and a host of other things. So I didn't really realize the extent of my issues I was having with ARFID until then, other than I'm picky and it was just distressing. So I started really accommodating myself more, just in every aspect of my life, especially like sensory wise. And so I more just accepted, especially because like I had heads and pots, that like I just had like treats and like not treats, I don't like that word. I had candy with me often to like help my blood through my body. I would have lots and lots of snacks. I ate the food that I wanted to eat and tried to kind of cleanse my mind of the shame I had for eating more like kid or childlike food. Like I like to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day. I don't know really, other than that, too much to the extent of what it changed in there. So, right, this is when I was 25. When I was 27 is when things dramatically shifted for me with food. I had a spiritual awakening, which I talked about a lot. And basically, it was due to like an injury. Anyways, but basically, I was never spiritual before, and I suddenly felt the need to change everything when it came to food. So I was largely looking at spiritual practices, specifically Sadhguru, and I was just really drawn to him. I was terrified of everything spiritually because of past lives of mine. I figured out later. Anyways, but I started doing everything differently. I learned spiritually. Now, I don't hold these views and beliefs anymore because though these are spiritual practices, I view them as very lack mindset instead of abundant or like identity creation mindset, which more to me values a merging of the spiritual and the physical instead of trying to push yourself into a purely spiritual space, which is dangerous for autistic people in my mind, which I've explained in my energy body series on TikTok. But I think for a lot of people who are like more spiritual, I think they're holistic, and it's not very dangerous to separate from the energy body that much. Anyways, so if you're trying to live this like pure bliss state without desires or like connection to your authenticity as much, in my opinion. There's certain spiritual rules. So I started following all of them. Again, I don't do this anymore and I don't believe in this. Like that it's healthy for me or that we ought to be doing this. Okay. But it was very helpful and I'll explain why. So I started only drinking water 4 to 5 times a day in large quantities, small sips, about the body temperature or a little lower. I started eating only 1 to 2 meals a day. I think it was, is it 21 or I think 24 bites? 24 bites of food, you chew it 24 times. You only eat with your hands. I was only eating with my hands almost everything. I went completely vegan, or at least I was trying to. I'll get into how this all went. But this was in like May of 2024. I went vegan because I was basically vegetarian most of my life, besides like a few meats that I liked. But now I wasn't eating any dairy, even though I really like dairy. Now I really like to have dairy-free things. So, and I was like cooking in a very particular way, only eating organic food, which I still mostly do. Don't have food dye. I don't have food dye anymore. It's not healthy for me. And just have things as natural as possible. A lot of other really specific things. But after the 3 weeks of my spiritual awakening, where I had no mental or physical health issues, which I was born with, and it was incredible. I had hope for the first time in my life that I could ever heal these things instead of maintain them. It all went crashing back. I kind of reverted on all my food things. I was so depressed. And then like in October of that year, 2024, I set like all these goals, which were to heal my mental and physical health, which a year and a half after that, it is healed. I'm so excited, so happy. But I had a really hard time. I just kept going back and forth with a lot of things, a lot of shame and guilt. It was really, really overwhelming and terrible. So it wasn't really until like after January of 2025 that things really started to even out with my food habits. I was also only eating on the floor. I was praying about my food. I was waiting 2 minutes before eating my food. Oh, I also started having turmeric and neem every morning, which I still do. I like. They said ghee, but it's not vegan. So I have coconut oil, a teaspoon before every meal. That's good for me as well still. But basically, what this was doing, because, yeah, I was solidly doing it, like, by November, but I was still having issues. I didn't completely, like, be able to commit to this until, like, January, where I was basically forced mentally and physically to stop working, to stop living where I was, and 24/7, I was just working on improving my health. So that's what I was doing. So, but this was really helpful because, again, for me with ARFID and interoception, I had like a really poor connection with my body. I didn't want to be in my body my whole life. So, like, I was with doing all this yoga, all this meditation, this constant mindfulness, this healing of my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome by putting my energy, my prana, my chi, my plasma, my life force, my soul, my higher self in my physical body, energetically. I healed my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, made a whole video about it. Healed my POTS. I believed I had MCAS as well, and I healed all this because, like, for me, I was putting my energy in my body, and I think for me, I had all these physical disconnection and chronic pain because of how suicidal I had always been, where I was just constantly pushing my energy out of my body and it was deteriorating my body. Not to say that's why other people have any of these things, but for me, that's what I believe why I had this and how I healed it. So by doing this and being so mindful and actually like when I was chewing these slow 24 times, I also stopped watching any media while I was eating, which I'd always like needed to do. Because if I just thought about food, I just started having a panic attack. Always. I always watch things while eating now. I think it was just important for me to stop doing that for a while. I mean, I guess it was probably like a good 6 to 8 months solidly doing that, I suppose. And then I started, well, I'll get into that though. I'll get into that. So when I was chewing, like I was thinking about my teeth. Like I heard like some autistic people, they don't even feel like they really have hands, especially autistic people who have more like motor issues. Like they're not connected to their body in that way. For me, like chewing the food, feeling it in my teeth, feeling my tongue, feeling it in my mouth, feeling it going to the back of my mouth, feeling myself swallowing it, feeling where does it feel in my stomach. And I've had other like stomach issues I made whole separate videos about that made me really disconnected to my stomach and my intestines. And so I was really just feeling the whole issue. I've also had issues when it comes to like bowel movements, which I did a video about as well. So like, again, just so many things. I was just mad at my body for existing, mad that I had to eat to keep existing in an existence I didn't want to fucking be in, and mad that my body had all these issues throughout my life. It's like I had no incentive to connect to my body. But I went those 3 weeks with seeing how fucking wonderful it could be. So I'm like, okay, I have incentive enough. I know it can get this good. Right? So this was what it took for me to get there. And like, there's all this stuff with my intrusive thoughts. Made a whole video about that, but that was really important. Like, that would happen a lot more while I was eating because I wasn't consuming any media. So all of this, because a lot of it was like, I don't know, it's about time as well and structure and schedule. But what ended up happening was my goal no longer was to expand my palate, I was just fully accepting what I like to eat, eating the same things every day, as you know, and just really accepting that, which I'd already done for a few years to an extent. So, just so happy with where I am now that that it got to the point where I just felt a lot better about food. And I used to, like, for example, I used to only eat white bread, and I hated seeds. I've always hated nuts in general, but I started doing, like, I did this recipe of Sadhguru's that had cashews in it. I never even, like, since I was 5 years old or something, even tried nuts because I tried it once. I hated it. But if I chopped them up and I started actually liking the texture of, like, to me, before I would feel shame or guilt if I didn't like it. I would feel fear of even trying it. But instead, I got into this mindset, again, took a long time of like, I can try it. If I don't like it, that's okay. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a less valuable person. I'm not unworthy of love or acceptance from myself or others. It's okay if I waste this food. It's not even a waste. It was a learning experience for me. It's okay if I like something one time and never like it again. And this is just really the intrusive thoughts, just a big role here for me. And so I ended up really liking like bread with seeds in it now, which I never liked before. Now it's what I prefer. But it wasn't because my goal was to extend my palate. I hate that being like a goal. My goal is to feel good with food, to heal my relationship with food. If that extends my palate, I'm neutral about it. I just really frustrates me when goals are to increase the types of food you're having as if that's better for you. What's good for you is to feel love and compassion and at peace and joy from what you're eating. Another way I did that was looking into the process of how food is made. And I used to pray, again, none of this spiritual stuff is like even healthy for me anymore. It was at the time, and it was helpful to heal. And people can choose to continue doing these things if they make them happy, right? Nothing wrong with the spiritual practices in and of themselves. But like I would thank the earth for growing the food and the sun for providing energy and the water, and I would thank all the workers for planting and gathering and packaging the food, and delivery people for bringing the food. And like, I would just thank every aspect of the process, and I would hold the food in my hands and I would smell it, and I would allow myself to cry too if I was having a hard time, and I would never force myself to finish food, because I used to have a really hard time finishing food, because I again thought that was like the goal, or like you'd be praised for if you finish your food. Or like, for me, it's really important to be able to have other types of food instead of just one type of food. Like, especially with me with ARFID, I would get not be able to eat a certain type of food but still be really hungry, but be told you can't have another type of food till you finish this one. So I would just go hungry, right? So it gave me so much anxiety that even if I did still want a certain type of food, I couldn't eat the last few bites of it. And that was really stressful for me. But now I don't care if I throw away last few bites. It's helped me be able to finish food again, not with the finishing food being the goal, but with the loving my body where it's at. That's the goal. And however my body responds to that in a regulated way, like, that's great. That's my goal. Regulation. Not eating a variety of food, not finishing my food, not eating a certain amount of food. So with that, with getting rid of all these maybe more like societal goals, finishing the food, expanding what you're eating, expanding when you're eating, right? Instead, my goal was just to connect with food. Those things ended up happening naturally. Not those things are morally good or that's what you ought to do. It's just what happened to happen to me. So I think that's just so important when healing too. Like, for example, my goal with dissociation was to be present. My goal was never to heal DID or to integrate. But when my goal was to be present and did so by being compassionate to all intrusive thoughts, I ended up integrating my DID and I do not have it anymore. So my goal with food was to enjoy eating food, to find joy and pleasure. And that's, some people, in my opinion, a more lack mindset of spirituality, really detach themselves from pleasure. My goal was to find a lot of pleasure and joy and satisfaction and fulfillment and tranquility in food. And that happened to expand my palate and to make it so that I finished food when I was still hungry to finish that food, right? So that's kind of what I did. Praying, thinking about where the food came from, really just so much love, joy, and compassion to myself. So after that, this really started to shift last summer, 2025, where the practices I had for, again, I don't know, like largely over a year, like since it all started with my spiritual awakening, but probably like, again, 6 to 8 months solidly of me doing these things. The things started to stop working. Like, for example, slowing down wasn't working anymore. I needed to speed up. I was still talking to my different alters, but in November, I talked to them. I'm like, why aren't you interacting with me? Oh, because we're not here. You're just talking to a memory of us. Okay. So it wasn't, I don't know the exact the exact time. I mean, probably, I mean, solidly in like August, I started just watching things again while I was eating always. But I felt a bit of guilt and shame because I'm like, but I've healed my relationship with food, and it came from from not watching things in particular to kind of work through all these things. And my binge eating had healed as well. It was helpful that I no longer wanted to eat the particular food because it didn't align with like being organic and such like that. It is a food that I still would be open to eating, but I no longer just have an interest in binging. Not that I wanted to be binging, of course, but it's more so that what was causing me to binge for me was depression and suicidal ideation, and I don't have those things anymore. and I would just eat past the point of being full, and I never feel like doing that anymore. But I also never could tell when I was full because of poor interoception, and now I can tell when I'm full. Kind of thinking about this for the first time, like why I stopped binging. But I think I really solidly, I started to stop binging like last January, I guess. And yeah, all of this like solidly aligned, I would say last August, but I didn't really fully, even some of these months of this year, because I was only drinking warm water, but in August, maybe June or July too, because it was starting to get hot. I stopped drinking warm water, but I was like, oh, I know spiritually, even people who live in hot places, they still drink hot water, and that's good for them. It just wasn't good for me anymore. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of spiritual reasons, like, again, more with these energy bodies and like me merging the spiritual and physical in just a way that I don't think like gurus are doing currently. But yeah, I stopped drinking hot water. Hopefully I'll be able to drink hot water again, because like I do like tea and such. It just hasn't been good for me. Also, it's just I've done so much internal change. Warm water kind of helps flush things, and I needed to like stop. Like since February, March, I've just needed to stop changing. I've stopped everything spiritually. So for food, I no longer pray before I eat. Again, all these things are fine. They just aren't healthy for me right now. And I might never integrate them into my daily habits again. They're not important to me anymore. And that's okay. That's neutral as how I feel about it. I don't pray about my food. I don't wait 2 minutes before eating it. I don't eat purely with my hands. I don't drink hot water. I was also almost only eating foods that were, again, like more body temperature, unless it was like fruit. I don't eat just 2 times a day anymore. I more eat maybe 3 to 5 times a day, depending on how large of meals I'm having and when I'm up. But yeah, other things spiritually, like I stopped doing shadow work, I stopped journaling, I stopped meditating, I stopped doing yoga. And again, these things I want to do to some extent, or at least I wanted to. I don't know anymore, to be honest. But I physically can't. Like, I'll start getting mentally and physically sick if I try to do these things. And my theory is that I just need to stay still. I did so much internal change the last year and a half, 5 years, to be honest, that nothing's changed in my physical, and I just need to stop internally changing. I don't listen to channeled messages anymore. I don't do tarot for myself or for social media anymore. Like I can't even like really exercise or like sing or dance anymore at this moment, which is really odd, because like singing and dancing are things I want to always be doing in my life. So things have just really stood still. But what I realized overall is that I no longer need, for me, any of these practices when it relates to food, because I've healed it. Again, if those practices bring you joy and they feel good to you, even after you are healed, I think you ought to keep doing them, right? If they make you happy. But I'm very happy without doing them. And so I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved. I'm so grateful. Again, I guess I would still, like, autism isn't something to heal. So my interaction with food that doesn't come from anxiety, but more sensory wise and preferences, that's not going to change, probably, right? Like, I like consistently having the same types of food. I like having a smaller variety of food than most people. And that is not something that I was looking to change or am going to look to change. If that changes, so be it, right? But my anxiety about food, because of how I interact with my body and my mind, my thoughts, my surroundings, not just with food, but within grounding and regulation in general, has drastically changed my relationship with food. And for me, with binge eating, I don't do it anymore. I don't interact with that certain type of food I was anymore. I think I have to like some extent if it's like just in a different format, basically, or like with other things. But I honestly just don't even feel the desire because I don't feel the emotions that led to me binge eating. I also just know how to pass those types of emotions with engaging in healthier coping strategies because I don't demonize what I was doing, binge eating, to cope, or even people pleasing, like in that relationship, to cope with my emotions and what I was going through. It's simply, not very simply, went through fucking hell to get here. I have healthier coping strategies now. So I'm no longer, I've just shed those types of coping strategies of binge eating and people pleasing. Um, and whatever the fuck was going on with like maybe those tics that I was having. So I just feel really happy because like maintaining my body and my life doesn't feel like a chore anymore. I've gained a lot of interoception and connection with my body. I just love my body so much. And also honestly, like I've talked about this in other videos again, like appearance wise, I've been a fluctuation of different weights in my adult life to the point that I was like in a medical sense like very overweight, and was commented on by doctors as well. For me, I've always been well, other than a short amount of time when I was 19, I was underweight in an unhealthy way. But other than that, I've always been a healthy weight for me and my body. And so it was actually really helpful for me to be heavier because I really embraced how I looked then. And I kind of really shed a lot of these ideas of like feeling value for being thin. And I am thin again now. This is how my body is interacting with what I'm doing in my life now, and I feel good about it. I feel healthy. I no longer look at my weight as a determination of my health. For me, it's not helpful. And I just feel really I'm neutral about what my body is naturally doing and celebratory about how I look, regardless of how I look, and just really praise myself. Instead, I kind of viewed myself very detached. I also had depersonalization, but I viewed myself as like some type of trying to fit myself into some standard or ideal, especially presenting as a woman most of my life, to I love my body consistently and genuinely instead of for fleeting moments that are shaped and pushed in judgment of I'll feel this way as long as I keep looking this way. And even that, I felt like I always needed to look better. But shedding all that has, I really think, helped improve my relationship with food as well. So I feel really good. I feel really good about it. And I would really like to hear any of your experiences with food, eating disorders, ARFID, autism, especially, I guess I never looked into it, but if anyone's experienced like tics or Tourette's specifically around food, because for me, I don't think I've really ever had that happen other than when it was about food and it just came on suddenly and it took a while to fade out as well. So overall, it's just really important to be kind to yourself, to allow yourself to be really flexible on your healing journey. Know that like the journey doesn't always look like the destination. Like a lot of the habits I have now were similar habits to what I had before that weren't healthy then and are healthy now. And the habits in between that helped me heal are no longer healthy for me now. Um, yeah, and again, instead of having particular goals you think you ought to have, I really would encourage people to have goals that are about doing what's best for their body and being open to what that looks like for them in particular instead of a certain fixed thing, right? For me, it's more, how do I want to feel about food, and having like the feeling being the goal. Peace, joy, pleasure, tranquility, exuberance, fulfillment, right? And so those were the emotions that I was manifesting, and that is what I brought into my life. Not that I knew how I was going to get there, and I thought that how I was getting there was going to continue after I got there. And I've been very surprised to learn that wasn't true for me. So, in that, really just, instead of valuing the habits, for me, continuing to value the feeling, and go and be flexible with following where that feeling leads me, even though it led me back into a lot of habits I had before. And that's okay, because I really like the physical realm. I really like not being in this constant state of more detached spiritual bliss. I like consuming media when I eat. I like not thinking about how many times I'm chewing or how many bites I'm having. I like eating a more variety of food in terms of like the temperature and types of food and types of drinks and such. So for me, I just really value what's authentic to me and what feels good to me. And I'm just so grateful and blessed to be at this part of this healing process where I am healed, and I get to enjoy food, and it's so wonderful. So I appreciate you being here with me for my story and my journey. And for anyone dealing with any issues regarding food, I wish you a peaceful and prosperous time on your journey as well.